Hi, everybody. Welcome to Truth Teller Tales. I am Ellen, and I am just dedicated to interviewing those folks who are truth tellers in this most incredible, amazing time to be alive. And I feel that they will be studied for generations. I have someone it's an honor to have him here this evening, all the way from Thailand, actually. His name is John Michael Chambers, and he has been in the freedom movement for over 2 decades. He's an author of several books, including the five-star Amazon rated Trump and the Resurrection of America, and the best selling book in medicine and science at Amazon, Genocide, Jab, Vaccines, Villains, and Victims. John's new book, titled Global Financial Reset: Surviving and Thriving the Transition, will be published in November 2025. John is a public speaker and the creator and founder of the trailblazing online news network, American Media Periscope. Today, John works can be found by visiting jmcbroadcasting.com for wartime coverage with military and intelligence experts. John continues to challenge the mainstream news narrative, keeping us all informed, empowered, and connected. Please welcome John Michael Chambers. Hi, John. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you here, Ellen, and thank you for having me. Don't mind if I sip some coffee. It is 7 a.m., but
No,
7:30,
I
but nice to
I
see you.
know. Thank you from Thailand. This is such an honor to have you here. I feel like we have so much to talk about. But first of all, before we dive into your life, I just have to thank you because your interviews they're all different. Sometimes it's just you, sometimes it's interviewing retired military. um you just have such a wonderful way of getting information out, of asking questions, and it's so insightful, and it's going to continue to be so. Um, and the folks that you're interviewing are just wonderful. And it's interesting. Do you think that you're going to be, as these tribunals happen, do you think that you're going to be a part of those interviews and of what's happening behind the scenes as this progresses?
Yes and no. Yes, no, in the sense that I will not be at Gitmo as one of the approved media people to be on the ground covering it. That would be a no. I'm 10,000 miles away. However,
Yeah.
the yes part would be through the interviews I do, through the work I do. Eyes on Gitmo is a newly launched monthly program. We've concluded our second episode with Juan Savin and retired Lieutenant Colonel Matt Meck, 20 years in the Marines, who spent
Mhm.
quite some time at Gitmo in a couple of capacities, one in tribunals themselves, and two in helping set up the media center. Through those connections, I think will be pretty fast at getting the data to the American people once Gitmo gets officially launched in terms of the media center, and we'll certainly have good military and good intelligence sources to get us data as it's happening. So that's as close as I'll get.
Yeah, but that's close because the information that you're getting, though, is phenomenal. And I encourage everyone to go back and watch all of your programs. They're just eye-opening and wonderful, and just how you ask questions and your steady hand, and it's just wonderful. And I just want you to know how much I and many people that watch your broadcasts appreciate you so much. Um, and
Well,
and
thank
so
you, thank you, and it's nice to hear that. Simply because I spend a lot of my time staring at a little black box, teleprompter with a
yeah.
camera on it, and a computer over here. And we do have about 2 million collective views each month for the few shows that I host, which per capita, if you want to say, is pretty high. So you're reminding me that we're actually reaching people's hearts and minds, and that's encouraging to
Oh,
hear that
yes.
my message is resonating. It's not me, I'm the middleman and so forth and so on, but it's the guests I bring in, and I predominantly speak to on JMC Broadcasting military and intelligence by and large, with the occasional uh, Sherry Tempany or Richard Mack or Sheila Holm, people of that caliber, simply because we're at war. and I want to be lean and mean with military and intelligence reporting. And so that's kind of what I do and I focus on. And um, I get educated in every show that I'm hosting. I've
Hmm.
done the research, and it doesn't take a lot of time to do the research to prep the questions, maybe an hour or so, because like you, I'm on the pulse of what's going on day by day in this interesting movie and war that we're engaged in, and so I prepare my questions, and what I do is once I ask them is I don't speak. I
Yes.
listen. I listen to what they have to say because that's the reason I do what I do. And it seems to be working. We're getting good data out there and people are sharing it and appreciating the work. And I think it's important. There's a flood of podcasters and truth revealers or news journalists, a whole bunch of different categories of the voices today that are out there, and many of them are doing great work, but unfortunately, many of them are not, and it muddies up the
Hmm.
waters. I mean, I could
Hmm.
talk about that later if you want to dive into that from a Department of Defense viewpoint, because they have something to say about it. But go ahead.
Oh, gosh, I well just touch on that now. I'd love to hear on that topic what you mean by that.
Sure, I don't mean to be elusive, and I'm sure your audience is going to be familiar with what I'm talking about once I go there, which is really right now. For example, Dr. Jan Halper Hayes, who does many things, but in part serves on a committee in the Department of Defense, and one of the things that they were working on at least a while back, and even as recent as I'm going to say 6, 8, 9 months ago. I haven't spoken with Dr. Halper since, but we're trying to bring her back into our wheelhouse. But on camera and off camera, a little bit more off camera detail. One of the tasks that the committee was tasked with was to study us, study the new media. I'll call it with the podcasters and so forth. I would say you've got the dead and dying fake news media level, Fox,
Hmm.
CNN, and the rest of them. All right, I'm not going there. Then you got another level down. This is just my opinion. The
Hmm.
Newsmax level of the world,
Yep.
the Steve Bannon War Room, and maybe one or two others of that level of delivery and so forth. Then you have everybody else, which is really the largest collective voice there is. And in that space, they know who we are, they know where our money's coming from, those that have a flow, and they know who our friends are, and they've identifying who's putting out disinformation, who's putting out lies, who's putting out propaganda, who is getting dirty money, who is with us, who is not with us, and at the same time, who's good but just maybe not doing that good of a job, and then of course the ones that are doing a good job, and then also studying, of course, psychologically the impact of everything that's going on in this war.
Yes.
We are sort of a beta test for them as well, and the reactions of our audience. So believe me, all eyes and ears have been on the we'll call it the podcaster movement, and I'm not privy to reveal certain people or individuals and certain things that was told to me and certain things I've experienced and speculated on my own. But it's all going to come out in the wash. Perhaps later in our discussion, if you care to revisit it, I have a philosophy and a view of where I think media is heading. And I could definitely be wrong. I've got a high degree of accuracy in forecasting things, but I'm human, probably 10%
Yep.
wrong. But I do have some opinions about that if you want to get into it later.
I do. And don't you think, John, that this is just the most fascinating time to be alive, that there are these podcasters in media and to your point, those levels, and that they're all known and studied, um, and and infiltrated, and for
Mm,
psychological reasons, because we are in this psychological war as to how the podcasters operate, how they're being affected, how they're being affecting people. Isn't it amazing, John?
it is. It is. It is. I mean, it's really amazing. The level of layers you can go down if your confront level is high enough. Um, what's going on is mind blowing. And when the full disclosures it's happening day by day, drip by drip, bit by bit. But when the real red meat, if you will, starts to get disclosed,
Yeah.
uh, even people like yourself and I and many others that would consider ourselves fairly awakened for quite some time. One of the folks I interview every month and every other week on a show called BOSI Briefs, and he also attends my monthly Global Defense War military panel. Of course, I'm talking about retired Lieutenant Colonel Ricardo Bosi from Australia.
Yeah.
He said to me on air, and we've certainly chatted off air, that oh boy, I lost my train of thought. You mentioned something just a moment ago. Yeah, the
Uh,
psychological impact, right. And so what he
yes.
said, even those of us that have seen and understand the adrenochrome and spirit cooking and the horrible, horrible, horrible insanities that this evil is being done, he
Yes.
says even people like us are going to be shocked with some of the stuff that's coming. So I think people like us, and I'm not saying we're better, we're not, we're just who we are, and we've chosen this road, and that's the way it goes. But people that are awake and have looked at the issues, we have a responsibility, I believe, to help those along. Now, let me differentiate. I'm not talking about the crazies. I'm not talking about the lunatics. The hell with them. They're in the way. They'll be dealt with by the armed forces, and they'll be dealt with their maker by their maker down the line. I'm talking about our neighbors that just happen to have a D on their flagpole instead of an R. um, they're going to need our help, and even those that are Republicans or awake are going to need our help and what's coming. And so, in fun conversation, on my Global Defense War panel, five military, one of them being Derek Johnson. Derek, of course, is done the amazing work in connecting the dots on the executive orders in the PEDS and the
Yes.
war of law of war manual and how it relates to events. But he's also an entertaining individual, and he kept saying, we all call them the sheeple and the normies. And I said live on the show, I said, let's come up with a more friendly term because we're trying to help them. So let's not call them normies and sheeple. It's a bit derogatory. So he came up with the target audience, and I like that. Uh, you know, that certain operational events that we see taking place, like the Charlie
Hmm.
Kirk issue, for example, and many other things, are certain things that Derek points out are for the target audience. But anyway, well, I'm off track here rambling, but it
They
is
are.
important for us. It's important for us to help of the others as they start to see the atrocities. That's
And
where
I
we
want
go
to,
when we go all, right?
where we go, when we go all, and I want to hear about your life, and then I want to talk about the biblical implications too, because I think it's no accident that there are people that are awake to this spread all over the world like lighthouses. There's no,
Hmm.
I mean, there's just no accidents. But so I want to get back to that. But first, I I think, we're people like you are going to be studied. So I just think it's great just to get to know you more and your life. So tell us kind of where you were born, how you started out in life, and what kind of kid you were.
Ask my mother. Rest in peace and love her dearly. I was born and raised in New York, born in Queens, not too far from President Trump, Donald Trump, and was born in 1958, so I'm 67, and four sisters and me. Uh, Unfortunately,
Oh,
my father died when I was 14 and he was 39, leaving
oh
behind a
wow.
mortgage, small house on Long Island, New York. My mother and my four sisters, ranging from age 9 months to 16, me being the second oldest. So that was sort of but it was lower middle class, I would say, something like that. Um, we were happy. I had my Mickey Mantle #7 pinstripe baseball uniform on. My
Oh.
father took me to the games. He would take my neighbors, kids, my friends, would all go to Yankee Stadium. Uh, so I had a lot of influence from my father. Uh, Baseball was one, and then
Hmm.
when he passed, music was the other. Very big music. At that time, he was listening to Woody Guthrie and Bob Dylan and the Beatles and
Hmm.
just all the incredible music. that we had in those years. It was really a very artistic, creative period of time, in my opinion, and certainly in comparison to most of today's music. And just to fast forward a bit, yeah. And so when my father died, I was kind of obviously in a state of confusion, and I was
Yeah.
quest for answers, but
Right.
of which I still to date haven't found. But I've figured some things out. But basically, I had a decision to make at about 14 or 15, because there's only so many hours in the day when you go into junior high and high school that you can do things. So it was either go out for the try out for the baseball team in school, or take guitar lessons. And I couldn't do both. So I started the sports, dropped off, figured I'd rather be a rock star than a baseball player. So I wrote, so over the years, I ended up writing about 50 songs. Some of the songs were theme songs of my shows at American Media Periscope,
Awesome.
the show bumper. And, but anyway, yeah, so I'm a graduate of the School of Hard Knocks. You fast forward a bit.
Well, don't
You
fast
know, we were,
forward yet. Don't
okay.
fast forward yet, John, because I just found this so interesting. So, when your dad passed away, did things change in your household drastically? Did your mom have to, was she gone more often? I mean, how did that, I mean, that's a big change.
It was a big one. Uh, Things changed, but we were very fortunate. Well, we were on welfare. He was sick for 9 months, lung cancer, barbaric treatments in those days, unbelievable, and he died. He was a veteran. He died in a VA hospital in New York City, and um, my mother is the one who gets the award. Raising five kids as a 39-year-old widow who didn't drive a car. She was old school mom,
Uh,
in the house, dressed, cleaning, cooking, taking care of the kids. Very important job. And it was
Very.
also during that period of time when they created the separation of men and women through women's liberation, and put everyone
Yeah.
out in the workforce to tax us to death and let the kids be raised by Sesame Street and the government. But that's for a different
Yep.
story. So
But true.
yeah, very true. So for me, to answer your question, yeah, of course things changed significantly. We were crushed. Uh, he was my best friend. My father, being the only son in the family, were very close. And but basically, my mother kept it together. Thank goodness. And this was an early lesson for me that I used. I used to be a financial advisor. I guess we'll forward to that in a minute. For almost
Hmm.
15 years, six independent offices in three states. And when I was doing
Oh,
estate and retirement planning, I always remembered what my father did when he was young. He bought life insurance. Now I'm not here to sell anybody life insurance, believe me, but he thank God and thank my father for doing that, because when he died, we were able to get off welfare. There was X amount of dollars sitting there, tax-free cash and she put it in the bank, my mother, didn't work, got Social Security a little bit for each child as a system, right? So you get some money,
hmm.
and and she raised us, took care of things for 5 years before she went out. Finally, needed to work. That money, I guess, ran out, but she kept the house. We didn't have to, she
Wow.
maintained it. She sold it years later, retired to Florida. She's since passed on about 10 years ago. Hey, I'm an orphan. If anybody wants to adopt me, I'm available.
John, that's funny. So, that's wonderful. I mean, wow, that's amazing, actually,
She was
that she
amazing. Yeah.
continued that stability with
Never
something like that.
never remarried, never remarried. Went out on a couple of dates. She didn't like it. I used to encourage her, take care of yourself now. This
Yep.
stage of your life, you've done for us. But she wasn't in her to do it. And so she pretty much stayed single the rest of her life and became a grandmother, and eventually shuffled off this planet. So
Mhm.
that's my youth in a nutshell. I went
So
to
in
one
high school,
semester of college. Yes, go ahead. Hmm?
I was gonna say in high school, so after that happened in high school, d did you say did you play sports in high school, or did you really focus on music? And what groups did you, what kind of a student were you? Were you the rule follower? Were you the rule
Yeah,
breaker?
no, no, I was a rebel. I was a rebel. You know, I had long hair, it was what,
Ah,
late 60s, early 70s, mid 70s, and I I really had a difficult time with the passing of my father. I was quite angry and bitter and resentful because why did this happen? And there were no answers. And I was raised Catholic. Once my mother gave me the freedom, she said, "Look, you get your communion, you get your catechism, you finish off all that, and you can do whatever you want." Well, that was the last
mhm,
time I dealt with the Catholic Church, but that's a different subject. So, but yeah, I was hit pretty hard by that. So my grades, I wasn't, IQ wise, I'm, notches above the average. It doesn't mean much. Character is everything, but I had the capability to get really good grades, but I disconnected. I deliberately did not care. I think I was rebelling. In hindsight, now I can see me, this little
yep,
disgruntled kid, a mess, and I was trying to get attention, and I got the attention. I failed miserably in eighth grade, almost everything. I basically didn't care, and
mhm,
so I went to see what's called the guidance counselor in those days. And I remember this little old lady. She was very nice. She saw what I was going through as a result of my father, and she knew I was deliberately didn't care, and I had the
yep.
capability of learning and getting good grades. So I got left back um, that year, and then the impact of that started to wake me up a little bit. And I said, this isn't, my mother doesn't deserve this. So
Yeah.
I ended up going to the guidance counselor and saying, listen, give me a chance. If I get, straight A's or hundreds or whatever the system was at the time, this 2 quarters, can you put me in ninth grade where I belong with my friends? And I did it, and she did it. So that was the turning point for me, in terms
Ah,
of at least going through the process. But quite frankly, and I'm not saying this to the people out there, education's important, not indoctrination, but I just wanted to get the hell out of school. And eventually I
mhm,
graduated from high school on time with my class. And then, it's like, well, everyone goes to college now, or you get a job. So I decided to go to college. But that's when I started to realize, I said, uh, I'm going to pay money, community college, Nassau Community College, Long Island, New York, pay money now to sit in it was a bunker, like those things that park the airplanes. And that's where the class was, on these old fields in this community college with like 200 people, and getting binoculars to see the instructor. And he's just
mhm,
yakking about stuff that meant nothing to me. And I said,
mhm,
I need to earn a living. And so the School of Hard Knocks began at age 19 for me, working for companies, and was also a musician. I performed at night, for my sanity. Sure, I got paid and had free
mhm,
beer and got some tips, but I did it for my sanity.
mhm.
Yeah.
And so you left college, and so you played music at night, and so what was your path that you took at that time?
Well, I was going nowhere fast, but I knew that I always used to use this term, "I'm just visiting." And no one knew what I was talking about. But what I meant is I'm visiting the way the average person, or we used to call the normies, we'll now call the target audience, were living.
Mhm.
While I was among them, and seemingly, like, remember the album The Pretender with Jackson Brown. Now I
Sure.
know these people are leftists, I get it, but his music was incredible. These were
Yep.
poetic, incredible songwriters, and Jackson Brown on the album The Pretender was pictured walking in New York or some big city when you see all the sheep, all the robots running around doing their thing, and there's Jackson Brown. He clearly stood out, and that was me. I was just visiting this turf, and living like the rest of them. And but I knew I never belonged. And because I have been, people, if you ask me how long you've been awake, I've been awake since I've had a conscious thought. And my whole life's challenge has been that struggle. What's wrong with me? Was my question, because I'm so different from everybody else. I don't fit in. I can fit in, but I have to act to fit in. And I didn't, so I struggled. But eventually, you fast forward to early 90s, a woman, she was strictly a friend, a good friend of mine in Florida, handed me two things, and that was it. It handed me something called the McIlvaney Intelligence Advisor, which for decades in those days was cutting edge, good stuff like Q MAGA today, sort of, hard to find data. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, now that's long gone, but handed me that newsletter and handed me a double VHS cassette called The Money Masters by Bill Still, which is a fictitious name. Your audience can go to YouTube and watch it for free today. And that was what exposed the money system and the Federal Reserve to me. And I said, man, I knew something was going on here. Now I had some evidence, plus that newsletter every month. I read it for 25 years. And that's what put me down the rabbit holes. That's what began for me. And at the same time, I was getting away from warehousing and managing warehouses and like all this like work that I was doing when we were still finishing off being a manufacturing and distribution country, because we're not anymore, but we
Mm-hmm.
were then. I was at the tail end of that, and I hated every second of it, but I needed a paycheck. So that's why I did the gigs at night, solo, duo, trio, and rock bands in New York for my sanity. But it was hard, having that lifestyle, and waking up at going to bed at 4 in the morning and going to work at 7.
Yep.
So eventually, I became a financial advisor. I got my securities and insurance licenses and so forth, and started to take life a little more seriously. I basically I think of Billy Joel, who had a song in the early days, "Street Life Serenade," I think was the album, and he said there was a song. I believe I've passed the age of consciousness and righteous rage. I found out that surviving was just a noble fight. I once believed in causes too. I had my pointless point of view, but life went on no matter who was wrong or right. And it's a song called The Angry Young Man, and I very much related to that because that's who I was. And so here I
Wow.
was all the way now at age 42 before I actually grew up. But I felt like I abandoned my passions, which was through
Mm-hmm.
music, because that's when I wrote all those,
Mm-hmm.
dozens of songs to get my voice out there. Like I had to do something about the pieces of reality that were coming into play for me as I looked around the real world that we were living in and starting to peel those onion layers back. And and while being a financial advisor wasn't on my bucket list, I was kind of moved into it by a friend, and I thank him to this day. He passed on too, but because I learned a lot about money, I learned a lot about the system. I learned a lot of things, and it was really the fact that I cared about people. I had good communication skills. I got trained up by the industry, and I became, according to the industry associations, the top 1% out of 350,000 advisors worldwide at the time. I had a perfectly clean
Wow.
ethics record from all governing licenses that were governed that I held, and I had a clean exit report when I left. Um, and so, yeah, I did that for 12 years. Yeah, I moved out to Colorado. I was born and raised in New York. I lived in Florida on and off for 30 years. But I did almost an 8-year stint in Colorado, which was the most creative time in my life and the most successful time up until later years then. And so, in hindsight now, the reason I became a financial advisor, because it wasn't on the bucket list, I abandoned my artistic talents
Mm-hmm.
and ambitions. I went to songwriting expos where the main people of the industries were there hunting out for songs to bring to famous artists. And I met a lot of famous people in a lot of these movers and shakers behind the scenes. But my music was way ahead of its time. I mean, I had a CD at the time called 1999 Songs from the Light with titles like Save America, God's Country,
Oh,
Message of Love, the Golden Age, and so forth and so on.
what?
And and the industry just said they basically embarrassed me in front of the whole group. They didn't like my music, but it's okay. I didn't care. Um, but anyway, yeah. So after 12 years as a financial advisor, in hindsight today, I look back at that and I say to myself, well, and I had this realization 10 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe, well, not 20, but 10 or 15, that it was to learn. it was A, to make money because, I basically lived like everybody, paycheck to paycheck, and trying to make ends meet and fix the broken car and go to some miserable job you can't stand to pay the taxes and have nothing left at the end of the day. That program. And so now I was making some money, and I did it because I was helping people. You do it,
Right.
you do the right thing, and the fruits, God's riches come to you. And so I learned a lot about myself and business and life, and it was needed. I see it now for what was to come later, which eventually
Mhm.
was uh, American Media Periscope. But prior to that, I formed a not-for-profit 501(c)(4) in Clearwater, Florida, called Save America Foundation, before President Trump took the name, of course, and God bless him. But I structured that in 2008 and 9, a registered corporation, a 501(c)(4) Save America Foundation. We did great work. We held a large-scale convention. We had Sheriff Richard Mack. Judge Andrew Napolitano was very popular on Fox. We had him at the time. We almost had Glenn Beck there. And it was a big events, and we held meetings, and we were waking up everybody. I've got lots of stories I could share at another time about our interactions with Marco Rubio, who wasn't even senator yet, our original interactions with Pam Bondi, who hadn't yet become the Attorney General for Florida. We've got some history there,
Interesting.
and we took our lumps because we covered stuff. I'll just say it this way. The conspiracy theories of yesterday that we spoke about have proven to be the conspiracy facts and realities of today. And our digital record and my published songs and my published books are evidence of that. So there's my defensive statement. But it's
I,
been an
I,
interesting journey, this life. Yeah.
that's so fascinating to me that the thing that because everyone has something that kind of accelerated their waking up, and yours was financial, learning about the Federal Reserve and such, and then you went into that business. I
Yes,
mean,
that
that's
was
just
really the
fascinating.
first. I always knew something was wrong in life and human relations. Why is there even money? What is money? Little green pieces of paper? What is that
Hmm.
about? And,
Right.
and why is there always war? I mean, you think about it. There's been war my entire life. We're soon entering a world without war, and you can thank God, Trump, Q, the military white hats, and probably some other powers for making that happen. And we're almost there. But I didn't like anything. I didn't question it. Nothing made sense to me. And kids aren't supposed to have these thoughts, but they were just there for me. So yeah, eventually, the concrete evidence I got that there's a sinister force running this world and controlling our lives was through the Federal Reserve. Control the money, control the natural resources, control the information, and control the money. You got it, and that's what they've done. And now it's being exposed, of course, and
Right.
we're about to flip the tables upside down on them, as Christ did with the money changers.
And I just have just a question of curiosity. When you were in the financial industry advising and you knew the truth about behind money and everything, did it
Yes,
cause you to be frustrated, like, ah, as you're
it's a
dealing in
great
that world?
It's a great question, and no one's ever asked me because also usually people don't ask me about me; they ask me about the issues of the day. So I'm happy to answer that because um, what happened is, remember I mentioned a few moments ago, this woman who was a friend of mine gave me that newsletter and those VHSs, which led me to that discovery. At the same time, I was studying to get my licenses to become a financial advisor. So I went through that because I needed to ground myself in life, through a
Yeah,
career. And I was being urged to go into it by a trusted friend, so I did. And but at the same, so here I am getting these licenses and starting a new practice and career of which I invested my whole life into for 12 years. I'm not a dilettante. When I do something, I do it. And so, but you're right. So here I am by day studying Wall Street's training classes, estate planning stuff, taxes and laws, and insurance companies and mutual funds, and how to sell all this stuff to the public and all that stuff. And then I'm also studying. Well. Money is not real. It's fiat. It's debt. We were
Yeah.
hijacked. The American coup of 1913 taking over our currency. And so, to answer your question, um, I couldn't do it anymore. And so, after 12 years of doing that, um, I was at the top of my game. You know, I had three homes. I had, well, one I took bought from my mother and later in life,
Mhm.
bought her a condo and took care of her. And, but, but, I, I call it, I climbed Mount Everest. I suppose I was the top 1%, 350,000 advisors worldwide. So I accomplished something. I made some money. I learned a lot. I employed people. Okay, good.
Mhm.
But I knew all this other stuff because by then I had gone down a million rabbit holes, way beyond the
Mhm.
Federal Reserve, way beyond the money world. And
Mhm.
I didn't know about adrenochrome then, but I knew about enough stuff back in those days. And, you know, that the presidents were placed there and the media. I stopped watching television by and large when I was 14, because I knew I could feel the programming. I saw it change. I saw when they first started to make men look like feminine buffoons, and you know they started, and I couldn't take it. So asked a good question. The concise answer is I couldn't do it anymore at some point because when I started to buy physical, tangible gold and silver or real estate in my portfolio, but I'm selling them everything else because the
Yeah.
licenses I had didn't permit me to sell tangible silver and gold or hard real estate. There's paper proxies now called, you know, mutual funds and stock mining shares and real estate investment trust, but I couldn't do it anymore. I really
Mhm.
had God knocking on my forehead for a much higher calling, and I made a big abrupt. It took me almost a year, but abrupt move and sold off my business and uh, transitioned the rest to trusted hands. And by the way, I took good care of everyone. I wasn't a stock jock selling stocks. I did estate and retirement planning with sophisticated techniques to protect and preserve people's investments. That's how was always my angle. And so I'm proud of the work I did there, but I had to get out. And
Yeah.
so I formed a consulting company called Asset Preservation Institute back in 08, 09, because I realized, well, what am I going to do? I'm completely unemployable. I'm like in my 50s. I don't have college. I have no experience except all this great experience, but no one's going to hire me. I've got no value, right? So you know, my savings was going away, and I get uncomfortable with that. And I remember sitting at the pool. Had a home in a nice place, and I was every day, the old school, with a pad and pen, brainstorming, what am I going to do with all this knowledge I have? How can I turn it into a living now that I don't want to be a financial advisor?
Yeah.
And it slowly came together. I did radio, Freedom It's Up to Us, 860 WGUL, a Sound Communications out of Tampa. I started interviewing people, talking about 9/11 and all the issues. Um, and then it's what brought me to forming the Save America Foundation. Now, how I made a living during that transition, because
Mhm.
501(c)(4, I didn't take a salary. I invested a lot into it. And the radio cost me 5,000 a month, and I barely had sponsors. So, you know, I'm out on a limb. How would I make a living? And that's when I figured, well, I have the knowledge. I know how the game is played on the insurance and the Wall Street side. Let me really help people now, especially 08, 09, 10, when Hank Paulson and the Deep State did the orchestrated collapse, as we
Right.
recall.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I said, well, people can join a membership, pay me a fee. I can't sell them products or give them specific advice. So I had training modules and classes and consultations, and then I refer them to good people into things that I think that would help them during that period of time, which predominantly was tangible silver and gold. And it worked then and it's working today. So that was an interesting
Yeah.
trigger point for me. Um, and then, you know, if you're interested, I can pause here, but I can tell you why I left the country for 5 years and
Yes,
how I
please.
got debanked, deplatformed, thrown off of everything, and you know that there's a story there, and that will take us eventually right to JMC Broadcasting.
Exactly. And that's what I want to hear about. So you're getting back and you used your knowledge and imagination to figure out this new way to be able to help people. And so then you did that for a while simultaneously, you said doing the radio and Saving America. And so then when did that shift and when then did you leave the country and why?
Sure. By that point, in talking with Juan oh 07, which is a galvanizing figure. The trolls have a field day with him, which is adds a few more badges to his shoulder. As far as I'm concerned, he's an absolute American treasure, and I know Juan well. 7 years I've been in his proximity of hundreds of hours face to face in multiple countries and dinners and interviews and phone calls. But we can talk about him later. What happened is and the reason I invoked Juan now is we had a shop talk conversation off air, that people that do the kind of things we do, especially him. I mean, I'm not putting myself in his category, but you know, I'm on his top five list of people he likes to talk with in this space. So,
Yeah.
but when we're in this world, it's not easy to maintain, find a good relationship, find good balance in your life because you really are going up against the other 8 billion. The whole thing is, I wrote a poem once called "Thoughts on a Gray Day," and then I put music to it later. And one of the lines was the ticking of the clock, the robotic hypnotic flock mirrored reflections
Ah,
from the glass, faces gone, bodies past. But the point is, I ramble so much. You asked me how I got to Asia. So what happened is my life fell apart because I
oh.
didn't understand balance. I was
Mm,
not cognizant of keeping physically, spiritually, mentally grounded
mm-hmm.
and making sure that the normal things that people do, a wife, kids, and the house, and all that stuff, I didn't have that worked out. Yeah, I had a beautiful home in the mountains and had a cabin in the mountains and had a wife. She was Chinese American, born and raised in communist China, but was a citizen of America in America when I met her. And we were married for 12 years. Marriage was a disaster, completely fell apart. I'll spare all those details. And so I leave the financial services. I'm doing the radio. I formed the Save America Foundation. I'm putting everything into that
Yep.
and nothing into anything else. And so I couldn't, So also, I'll say this: go back. When did I leave the country? The truth is, and I say this is a saying, but there's meaning and truth to it. I didn't leave America. America left me. This is when Obama stepped in, when we were doing the healthcare bill, the Obamacare.
Mm-hmm.
And I was studying, and I knew a lot of people by that point already. Alex Jones, David Mackler, a whole bunch of people I was studying and looking at. I did work with Gia with Griffin at the time, and I and
Oh.
I I knew so much, and I was like, and again the imbalance of my life. So I just it was about to implode. So I said I'm going to leave, go to different turf, destimulate. People do that in war. They
Mm-hmm.
retreat for a while. They send them to the bases, then they bring them back into the battlefield again to patch them up,
Right.
and that's what
Yep.
I did. But guess where I moved to? Communist China, because my wife was Chinese. She was Chinese American, and her father was died, and the family needed help, and it was my family at the time. So I lived in China for a year and a half, and we finally got divorced, and there I was in Asia. Here I was a year before, 3 homes in America, 3 cars, a wife, 2 dogs, 2 storage units filled with stuff, the Save America Foundation and the consulting company, and responsibly I moved off and ended up then I'm in China, and now I'm getting divorced, which I flew back and we did embassy stuff and we got divorced. And I was left with 2 suitcases after having all that stuff. And I never felt more free in my life with less
Wow.
gravity of being pegged. Like I lived for 5 years without a mailbox. Think about that.
Oh,
That's a
yeah,
profound statement because what comes in mailboxes, 2 things you didn't ask for and don't want: bills and junk mail. I didn't
that's
have a
right.
mailbox. So what does that tell
Wow.
you? I didn't have any, I was out of the system as much as one can be. And so I took these 2 suitcases and I said, okay, I'm in Asia. America's burning. I I gave it my all. I've written books. I did all the public speeches. I spoke all over the country. What am I going to do now? Uh, and I needed space and time to figure that out. And that's why I went to Asia. And then I country hopped for a while. Hong Kong, China, Philippines, Thailand, Laos, can't remember. Anyway, and looking for a home. And
Yeah.
I only, in those 4 years, I was only in America maybe 10, 20% of the time. And then when I came to Thailand, and as you study about, you'll never meet anyone who's been to Thailand who says they weren't in love with it. Thailand's an amazing place, and so I felt comfortable. I said, I can call this home. I'll I'll anchor here. And so I did for about 2 years, and then I came home to America. And by the way, all this time, I didn't leave the battlefield. And let me make that very clear to the audience because I know what they're thinking right now. Mr. Save America jumped ship. No, the country jumped ship on us. I went to a safer port and fought the war from there. And that's when I wrote Misconceptions and Course Corrections. I wrote Trump and the Resurrection of America, 5-star rated on Amazon. But what happened is a friend of mine brought me back to the States, wanted me to help him raise money for a polling technology that can help detect precinct by precinct election theft. And he tapped me as a consultant to help him bring him to media and to raise money. And I did both of those things. I brought in Steve Bannon, I brought Roger Stone, uh, and so forth and so on. Unfortunately, my good friend Dr. Richard Davis, two citations from the Navy, individual citations for his advances in medicine and equipment, 400 patents worldwide under his belt. Uh, he and his wife think it was the deep state that killed him off, but he died of cancer after he exposed Ebola on Alex Jones. And but anyway, so I'm writing books. I got a Toyota filled with books. I'm speaking at Trump clubs, Tea parties, Republican groups all over the country on my own. Not a good business model, staying in hotels and eating out and selling books to make ends meet. I did some workshops on the financial thing to help generate some income for me and help people. And that was a phase and a painful phase, but a purpose. I'm still on purpose. And and then what happened is this is I want to finish all these stories and comment about the things of the day if we can get to it. But
Yeah.
I to finish the journey, since you've asked, is
Yes.
at this stage, my book is getting noticed. A guy named Bill Mitchell, when Ann Vandersteel was not very well known, she was the sidekick to Bill, let's say that, as co-host, I guess
Mhm.
is the proper term, on that platform. And they heard about my book and interviewed me, and they liked how I interviewed, and they liked what I knew and my passion. They asked me to be a host on the platform, but I didn't want to go there then. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But thank you. And uh, and that's when Robert David Steele, rest in peace, also found my book and contacted me and said, this is
Wow.
who I am. And can I use your chapter on Agenda 2030? He said, you've done, he rated me 6 stars, his highest rating. He said,
Wow.
you've done something with this book, and came out in 2017, right when Trump came in. He said, you did something with this book that's very hard to do. He said, you I'm paraphrasing him, but you speak to mom, pop, kettle on the couch, but you also speak to people like myself who know a lot or very intellectual people. You've managed to be able to communicate to everyone in this book. Bravo! Can I steal your chapter and talk about it? I said absolutely, and that became my relationship with Steele. 2 weeks before he died, I was communicating
Oh.
with him. But anyway, to finish the journey, what happened then is I a lady named Sandy who helped us get connected here. She's been
Mhm.
working with me for 10 years in a lot of capacities in this movement. I call her a boots on the ground warrior patriot. And she handed one to the mother of all rallies that they hosted on the Washington Mall back years ago. One of our peaceful protest rallies as opposed to the
Mhm.
lunatics today, the no king
Mhm.
lunatics. Um, a, a black gentleman with long dreadlocks, uh, who's what I call a recovering liberal Democrat from California, and we're good friends. And his name is Will Johnson from Unite America First. Sandy hands him my book, Trump and the Resurrection of America, at the rally. He had a popular podcast, probably still does to this day, and he read the book, and he calls me. I don't know the guy from a hole in the wall. And he says, "Would you? I'd like to interview you." And said sure. So we did an interview. It was really kind of I was doing radio interviews at the time and doing some terrestrial television and some podcasters to promote the book only. So
Mhm.
and it was all new for me, and I was a little uncomfortable doing it, but I got a little more comfortable as time went by. So then Will interviews me, but turns out he's a part-time independent correspondent for InfoWars at the time. And he sent the interview into Alex. Thus begins my journey with Alex Jones. So so now Will Johnson gets it into Alex. Alex likes it. He crops 90 minutes down to 20 minutes and took a segment out basically where I talked about this Federal Reserve and I talked about Obama. And
Oh,
they
wow.
turned that into a production piece and it published, and about 3 days later 725,000 people saw it. And at the time I was only known by those that I would go speak in public groups with because I didn't have internet
Hmm.
experience exposure. Well, I did now. And so, but at the time I had like my cell phone on my website, my email address. I got hit from all 5 countries, hundreds of messages on the phone, emails and so forth.
Wow.
And that's what led me to IMTV, Dr. Alan Keyes. You remember Alan Keyes, who ran against for president many years ago. We became good friends. Anyway, I became sought after as a guest and as a host on other platforms in
Yeah.
California, in Tennessee. And that's when I realized I went back home and I said, hmm, driving around in a Toyota, speaking to 50 or 100 people was good. But I sat down in my kitchen at my little table in my little apartment at the time, and 750,000 people heard me, and all this opportunity and traffic came. It did take long to say I should probably get in front of the camera if I'm going to
Hmm.
want to be more effective in the work I do. And
Yeah.
that's when it began. So I launched Making Sense of the Madness, which lives on. Your guest yesterday, Jason Burmis, that's my show. I gave him my show. And that I and I put it in good hands. Jason is dynamite.
Hmm.
So I formed that show, Making Sense of the Madness on YouTube. And I'm sorry I'm being so long about the journey, but no one's ever
No,
asked.
I
Let me.
love this.
I'm happy to have it on record for once and for all, so I don't have to do
Yes.
it again.
Supposed to be.
But
Yes.
let me finish it off, and I appreciate this time. You got me in my element here on me, which I usually don't do. When anyone knows my work, it's all about the movement, which I hope
I
we have time to
know.
get to, or bring me back and I'll discuss what's going on because I have a strong views, opinions, and a lot of hard facts for people. But so to finish this journey, yeah. So now uh, a lady, I don't want to give her name, was advanced in age. She had a group called the Sarasota Patriots, sort of like a Tea Party, but different.
Hmm.
And she had it for 10 years, but she couldn't do it anymore, health, age, so forth. And she was going to close it. I said, you can't close it. You've got momentum. It's Sarasota. It's an important area. She said, well, I said, I'll look and see if I can find someone who'll take it on. And then I just said, heck, I'll do it. And she cried, oh my God, someone of your caliber, which I think is kind of funny, but to take it on. So I took it on and I 5 times the traffic right away. I brought in the Q guys, I brought in some power people and but what happened is I had I eventually that experience from Will Johnson and Alex Jones and which brought me to IMTV. They put me up in Tennessee. I basically roommated with Alan Keyes for a week every couple of months, and I did a whole bunch of episodes as a guest on his platform. And they wanted to give me a show, and I didn't want to do it. I said, I gotta just do it on my own. So that's what led me to, because they were at the time a new network, and they were very not focused. And Keyes was focused, but part of the network itself was completely unfocused. Cooking show, and then Alan Keyes. I'm not into cooking shows right now. We're at
Yeah.
war. So,
Yeah.
so yeah. So, and God bless them, they're good guys. In fact, they ended up forming. They're the engine behind Mike Adams today. They're the tech. That's when
Ah.
Adams took off big. He brought it up with I forget the guy's name, who was the producer guy who knew all the technology over at IMTV, Alan Keyes. And I have to mention Bob the plumber. Bob the plumber. He's the guy who actually owned IMTV. The guy who put the money in it, and he was a plumber. Uh, but anyway, so what happened is I decided I'm going to do my own show. So
Yeah.
but at the time, and it still exists today, but it was a different time then. I said I had a following already, some following, and I said, how am I going to keep that audience? How am I going to continue to throw red meat to the already red pilled? But at the same time, who wants to preach to the choir all day? For what?
Right.
Stardom? So how am I going to bridge the gap? How am I going to bring, we'll
Yep.
call them the sheeple, in? And so I said, well, I won't do what everyone else is doing, the 4 box Zoom thing, talking for 3 hours and dropping F bombs, even though a lot of them do great work. And I've learned from them, and a lot of them are my friends to this day. They've interviewed me, I've interviewed them. My point in that story is the sheeple. I'm being them. I'm being the majority of the world we were in those years trying to do what? Wake up. So how could I bridge the gap? So instead of dropping F bombs with 4 people for marathon talks on Zoom boxes, I paid a studio and I bought the best technology, vMix, and I hired a producer. I paid money, I paid rent. And believe me, I sound like I'm rich. I was running out of money, and here I am in my late 50s, but I did it, and I was terrible at it, but because I was authentic and I was giving good data and I brought on good guests, people could people I became a trusted face and a trusted voice, even though I was far from a good host. I eventually became pretty decent at it, because number of times over. But here's what happened. So I'm doing the show. It's live, and I didn't do pre-recorded. We went live right out of the gate. I had a
Mhm.
teleprompter to keep me focused. We were on YouTube only, and it was me and a guest, and that was the show. And we ran commercials, and we had show assets moving around, and even the producer, vMix, was the Cadillac of the industry, and still is. She didn't even know how to use it, so she was learning. I was learning. It was like cowboys and Indians, but we did it. And then what happened is COVID hit,
Oh,
and everyone had to go home except me because I was essential media. So my little studio guy made a little badge for me in case a cop pulled me over. I never wore a mask unless I absolutely had to get on a plane to speak at all the Clay Clark events. But other than that, I didn't follow any of those protocols. And but what was good is, so what happened is this. I'm on YouTube 9 months. I'm developing a following. Took about 6 months before any monetization, and I do YouTube's monetization, did my own ideas, and it worked. Finally, it worked. So now it's getting monetized by the public because they appreciated my work, and the
hmm.
monetization was a value for them. They were buying gold and silver from Dr. Kirk Elliott, a PhD economist, good friend of mine for 15 years, and at no cost to the public. They were getting the lowest acquisition, the best advice, the best metals, and I was able to share in their revenue
Hmm.
by bringing the economist on as a guest. There's the secret to success. By the way, and Scott McKay has said this on camera. Um, let me just say this. I brought a lot of names that everybody knows in the podcast world, and it was Dr. Elliott and I's system that funded them by and large. But basically, what happened is now I get thrown off of YouTube just when I'm starting to get some traction. I was furious. I mean, I was
Wow.
furious, and I wasn't going to play the game, challenge the strike. You're never going to play, open up a next 50 more YouTube channels, tell everyone to come follow. I was already fighting the enemy, the deep state. I didn't want to now have to fight to keep my show on the air, and I'm not going to censor myself, and I'm not going to do anything
Yep.
they're asking me. So it took me
Exactly.
2 days. I said, what would Trump do? He would double down and counter punch. I said, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'll form my own news network. I knew nothing about news, nothing about technology. And, um, and the woman, I can say this now publicly, at the Charlie Kirk Memorial Seminar, Revival, Marketing Campaign, whatever you want to call that event.
Hmm.
Um, and at that event, they brought a woman on. When they started to bring on the speakers, they brought on the people that weren't famous but were important in Charlie's life. And if you watched it, you might remember, and I can mention her name because she did, Rebecca Dunn. She told the story at the memorial of how she met this young boy, Charlie, came to me in Tampa, Florida, and said, I have this idea. Can you give me $25,000? And she said, well, why don't you go raise 25,000? And if you get it, I'll match it. she told this story at the memorial, and and I knew the story long beforehand. And lo and behold, Charlie came back the next day. He raised 25 grand overnight in a state he really had no legs in. And she said, "Wow," and gave him to him. And then went on later, supporting him to the tune of millions of dollars, helping Charlie get started. She
Wow.
also did the same with Candace and other people. So I have a friend. I can mention the names because I brought them all on stage at Trump's Doral at my final farewell speech, my farewell speech at Clay Clark General Fund's Reawaken Tour, of which we were a media partner from day one. And I was also a platform speaker when I wasn't deathly ill, dying of COVID, long-term COVID, and being a recipient of the shedding. And that's another story for another day. But what we did was, uh, yeah. So Paul St. John, Fifth Special Forces Green Beret, great friend of mine, a hero really. Uh, I brought about 10 people on the stage at the Doral to acknowledge part of my team. We had 36 at the time at American Media Periscope, and I flew all them in, and they were all there. And it was my farewell speech, and I was so honored that day because I opened up that Saturday, and you know who closed it? President Trump via
That's
phone with
cool.
General Flynn. So I figured, hey, I'm a pretty good bookend here. But it was a nice way to end my speeches there. And the only reason they ended is because I was very ill. So I I brought Paul St. John, who introduced me to Rebecca Dunn when I get during my shows, Making Sense of the Madness on YouTube. And she funds Charlie Kirk. She has a trust that funds different entities based on this trust made. Hey, John's having trouble. They threw him off. Sorry, they threw him off YouTube. Long story short, she gave Charlie some seed capital. She gave me some seed capital, which was very much
Wow.
needed. And that's how American media. That's how I was able to counterpunch and double down like Trump did and said, "Screw you, YouTube."
Wow.
And if you're on YouTube right now, thank you, YouTube. But what I did was
Yeah.
I formed AMP, and I called all my friends that were all thrown off at that time because everyone was getting deplatformed. That's when Sean Morgan came in and Gene Ho and Alex Newman and it's the whole Scott Bennett, and that was the founding show host of AMP. So then we formed AMP. We did that. Um, it was very respectable work. We reached a lot of people, and what helped make AMP catapult. I burned through that seed capital in the first 90 days, setting things up and making some mistakes, but putting me on a map. COVID hit. I was already personal friends with Dr. Sherry Tenpenny from Ohio, where I wrote my book, Trump and the Resurrection of America. And and uh, and so we brought her on as a guest. She's the one who introduced me to James Grunwig, who was my co-host at the time, and everyone was forced to stay at home. I wasn't, so I drive to studio. Show went on. I did it, and because everyone was home googling COVID, I showed up at AMP, and we had 10 million views in our first 2 months. That's what put us on the map, and the rest was a
Wow.
lot of hard work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a bit
Wow.
of that story. And then finally,
That's
since we're going there, yeah, what happened to AMP? Those that know me that listening right now want me to
mhm.
go there, so I will. And I've never done this on there because I've not done any interviews. Once or twice with Scott McKay because we're friends, and Courtney Allen, such a sweet girl, she asked me to come on and drop some one intel, so I did it. But I haven't been doing any interviews, and I appreciate this interview very much. And I'm actually going to do a media blitz January, February, March. But to make this statement for the first time, I wasn't looking to sell American Media Periscope. We had zero debt. We had substantial reserves, all earned from my monetization idea that was deployed by Dr. Elliott and I. That was so successful, we shared it with others that are still living on today, biggest podcasters out there. And but I was very ill, and I got ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine from Sherry Tempany. Um, quick little story there. Pete Santilli called me up. He says, "I know you're in the same neck of the woods as Roger Stone. Roger's very ill. He has lung issues to start off with, and now he's got COVID, and his doctor won't help him." the way he should be helped. And so I called Roger Stone and he said, I'm dying here. I said, Roger, if you trust me, I'm going to go right into my medicine cabinet. I'm going to take out my ivermectin hydroxychloroquine, half of my inventory. I'm going to overnight it to you in a FedEx envelope. I did. He took it 4 or 5 days later. He said, you saved my life. I said, no, Trump saved your life because he introduced us to these drugs. But anyway, I got a
Wow.
million stories. So I ended up, because I was so ill and couldn't do it anymore. It's funny how the world works. I didn't hang a shingle as cell amp. I just couldn't grow amp any further than I had grown it already. I didn't have it in me. So I stepped out of
Mhm.
day-to-day operations to an extent. I had a leadership team, and all of a sudden, uh, Floyd Brown of Western Journal, very successful in his back in his day, who was friends with Flynn, came to me and asked me about American Media Periscope. And long story short, I used to see General Flynn every month because I would meet him at the green room and talk with him behind stage and do the pressers at the Clay Clark events. And he was always curious about, we did a lot of work for Flynn in the beginning, and I didn't charge a penny, of course, for him and Pat Byrne before America First and all that. So we were the guys streaming in their private events and doing a bunch of stuff for them. And so he was curious, watching me on the platform speak to standing ovations, watching him, helping him and Burns stream, and all. We were neighbors. They all moved down there, not far from me in Sarasota. So bottom line is, he was working through Floyd, and then finally Floyd said, "It's Flynn that wants to do this with us. You know, he's behind this. You know, let's partner up or sell me the assets of American Media Periscope." And so there was a board of three: General Flynn, Mark Schaffline, and Floyd Brown. And we transferred the assets over, all legal things, SEC controlled. They're a publicly traded company, over the counter exchange, Pink Sheets OTC. And so we did that transition, and with the ideas that they would take what I built and I built the foundation. They were going to build a skyscraper out of it. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
that didn't happen the way I had hoped and anticipated. And I'll just leave it at that for legal reasons. And I wished them well. And I offered free consulting for 3 years. And but anyway, so uh, I put a placeholder website out. That happened 2 years ago, to almost 2 years and a month or two. And so John Michael Chambers was the site that morphed into JMC Broadcasting. And now I use the word, I'm back. Quite frankly, when AMP was transitioned, we had about 2 million views a month. And I have that now with far less amount of shows that were being published. I'm lean and
Yeah.
mean. I'm into military and intelligence only. People, don't bore us, get to the chorus. They want
Yeah.
information. They want facts. They don't want propaganda. They don't want sizzle. They want steak. They don't
Right.
want stuffed for views. They want to know what is going
Right.
on because it's dangerous. And that's what we deliver. There's my story in a nutshell. And you're the great listener, and I'm a big talker here. But thank you for giving me the chance to lay all this down. That's the highlights in a nutshell.
I love it, John, and I love your story because every piece of every person's story, your journey, your book, all has to happen to get you where you are. And so I love hearing it. Every piece of what you've been through in your life leads you to where you are, and what you're doing, your niche is so important, and it's going to continue because the folks that you talk to and the questions that you ask, and I mean, you're exactly right. People tune in because they want the information. They love your questions, those answers that you're being given from those retired military heroes, and it's just phenomenal, and, it's going to be more and more and more needed as this journey continues, so, wow, what a journey
Mhm.
you have been on, incredible, and I appreciate you sharing all that so much.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having an interest in hearing. It's probably going to be your least viewed show because there's been no red meat. Who
No.
cares about John Chambers in the middle of a war? But believe me, to your audience, believe me, I can rattle the cages very well for you, uh, because you just mentioned something that's so important. We are at war. I mean, anyone who
Yeah.
knows what's going on understands that. As a matter of fact, you're connecting the PEDS, the executive orders. I mean, we're under a wartime command structure. I've been saying that for years, since 2020, when they stole the election, was when it officially was enacted. So I thought, while I have a good Rolodex, to use the old expression, I can get some pretty famous and some pretty household name people on my shows, and yet I don't. I don't because they have value to the target audience. My
Hmm.
target audience is that audience, but it's also another audience. And they can't go where I can go. And so if you're at
Right.
war, you might as well speak to good standing, high quality, retired military and intelligence.
Yes.
That's as close to the it is as Trump and his Joint Chiefs of Staff and Q as you're going to get. That's what people
Yep.
need. That's what people
Right.
want, and I'm doing my
Yep.
very best to deliver it through the programs that I host. And by the way, this whole 2 years, I'm not monetized now by one penny. I've spent north of $150,000 publishing this site and doing these shows out of my dwindling retirement account. Thank goodness I'm in a low cost country and my home is paid for and so forth. But these things happen by planning. Okay, but
Yep.
I now officially am monetized, and I'm very grateful for my sponsoring partner, Genesis Gold, Bill Armour, my contact, and that's helping me help people and helping me
Hmm.
finance this thing. Now, next month will be the very first month I don't have to pay for this activity that I've been doing. I'm not in this to make money. If I know how to make money, if I want to go make money, I'll go make money. I will make money to fuel this machine. That's what I'm doing, and
That's so funny,
I
John.
tried to I tried to semi-retire, which is also why I settled in Thailand. Lower cost, beautiful country, no GMOs, no chemtrails, nice people. While I'm not technically a Buddhist, I'm kind of fan of Buddhism because they're the only religion I know of that never started a war. Okay,
Yeah.
so you got to get there's a sense of peace here.
Yes.
And the country has its troubles like everyone else, but anyway, the point
Right.
is, I'm still at it. My new book comes out in a couple of weeks. I'm
That's so
hosting these
exciting.
various shows. And, yeah, and
Well, I want to ask you a couple more questions, but the one thing you said
sure.
sounded so much like Donald Trump. You said, I'm not doing this to make money. I know how to make money. If I wanted to make money, I'd go and make money. That sounded so much like
Well, I
Donald
don't
Trump.
mean
I love it.
I wasn't thinking of the president at all. I would never try and step into his valence or plagiarize him. It was really from my heart. That's when, of course,
Yeah.
I'm way lower scale than Trump, but it's the same
But it was
philosophy. It's like
Trump-esque. Yes.
it's purpose. It's purpose driven. That's what this is. I can't walk. I've tried to. I've had my challenging moments through these years. Trust me, on
Yeah.
many fronts. I had dark tinted Mercedes following me around. I've been debanked twice, deplatformed multiple times, multiple places. I've been sick. I my closely held folks around me when I used to get on the planes. A couple times they think I was deliberately poisoned. I don't know if I was or weren't from some of the things I had going on. But the point I'm making is, I've tried to walk away to bring. I think of the movie The Patriot, Mel Gibson.
Mhm.
Mel Gibson in The Patriot, you remember he played the character Benjamin Martin, and the other gentleman, warrior guys. Uh, Mel Gibson says, I can't do it anymore. He lost his kids. He just couldn't take it anymore. He wanted to go back to the plantation with the wife's sister and all the kids running around, what's left, and peace patch up his damaged soul from the brutality of war. And the guy said, "You can't. The troops need you. You're the spirit." And he went away for a little while, and he couldn't stay away. I'm not comparing myself to Donald Trump, and I am not comparing myself to the character of Mel Gibson. I'm just making an analogy of what many of us have experienced. And I just happen to have a platform through you right now and a voice to share mine. And that is that I tried to walk away. Okay, I'm in Thailand now. American Media Periscope's transition. I was still very ill. Let me work on my health and, get a life that I haven't had. I missed the things that people do: get married, have children, have grandchildren, have family, have parties, get together for Christmas and Easter. I didn't have any of that stuff. I missed it all. And
Mhm.
so, so, but I've learned I can't walk away. It's
Yes.
who I am. It's where I am. It's my calling. I am here. This is it. I'll know when it's time, but I don't even think about it. I get
Yeah.
up to do this every day. This is what I do.
Yeah. I mean,
It's an
it's a
amazing
shared
time. Yeah.
it's amazing time, and it's a shared warrior mentality. I mean, it definitely is, we each have our swords and they come out, and you just said that's just who we are, for sure. And I just also wanna comment that y you your shows are packed with information, but the other thing I really enjoy, you have some high-ranking retired military people oftentimes in the same show, and I love the camaraderie there, and you can feel the mutual respect that they have for each other and
Hmm.
for your questions. It has an incredibly respectful, wonderful feel, all of your interviews, as well as packed with information. So I just had to say that too, because I get that feeling when I watch these interviews that you do.
Thank you.
Um,
You mentioned high-powered military. I want to invoke this. During the COVID, during the J6 event, I interviewed Flynn back then. It went semi-viral. But I also interviewed a few times, together and separate, General McInerney and General Vallely, because J6 just happened, and we were live. All the shows were live, even with Flynn, and I interviewed them, and then I, later. I said something live on air that the generals disagreed with, and of course I said thank you, sir. But turned out to be right. I said it looks like we may be heading towards military versus military in the United States. Now, I didn't necessarily mean with guns in the street, but we certainly have experienced that now. We've learned about that, the plants within the military. So later, uh, General McInerney, who I feel very close to. I have such enormous respect for these people. He said to me on air, he said, "You're doing great work. You're very bold. You're a citizen." Because I always said, "Look, I never served in the military." He said, "You're serving your country right now as a citizen patriot, if you
Oh.
will." And
Mhm.
he said, "You were right about these certain things." He said, "Because I'm now talking to the same guys you're talking to," and it was Wano Savin. Off camera, we revealed the name. But I've had an interesting journey. I've had some wonderful and interesting conversations with General Flynn that I won't get into right now, concerning Q and other things. General Flynn is a master of disinformation. He's an American hero as far as
Yes.
I'm concerned. And but anyway, yeah, no, it's been one
Yeah.
hell of a ride. And right now, as you know, we are on the cusp of the final, most critical battles. Now, some of these things are going to go on for 10 years. Everyone thinks it's a quick flip the switch and everyone's dead and in jail. No, no, no. It's a process. And some things are going to go on for years. But the battles that we're facing right now with the deployment of the National Guard and the Army and so forth, which has a lot more to do than cleaning up crime and homelessness, as you well know, it's all part of the strategic plan for what is about to hit the streets of America.
Yeah.
And even Juan is still saying to this day, the precipice, we're not there yet. The gut punch, the what's the term he uses? I forget. Anyway,
This
there's
is
more
this part of
harm
the
and
scare
danger
event?
ahead, folks. Yeah. The I forget the words he uses. Anyway, we can get into topics at another time. I guess we've run this hour out plus.
We
I'm
have,
happy to
but
stick around and chat if you want, but I know you got to go. Yeah.
that's okay. I do wanna ask a few more questions, but on a side note, because this is so funny. Kid by the side of the road, he had given one person permission, Jetson White, to do an audio book version of it, and I actually am the voice of chapter 1 that I did
Oh
years
wow.
ago. So, yeah,
Nice.
so it's just so
Yeah.
interesting how, we're just all kind
Mhm.
of connected this way. So, I've definitely, watched many of your interviews, and so I have the basic understanding of what your answer is gonna be. But yeah, so we haven't hit the rockiest road that we're going to be hitting here. That's going to be happening. And so with that though, those things that are still covert and people like us who have been, understanding what's happening, we understand what is happening. But what do you think the time frame is when it gets to be more overt so that people who are just walking the streets worrying about their lunch might understand what's happening after a scary event? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a good question. And I thought of the term Juan uses, near-death experience. We haven't yet had,
Oh,
we thought people used to ask me, it was the near-death experience COVID, or was the near-death experience, when they were threatening to do more COVID type stuff? And the answer is no, at least according to my sources. And Juan's still on the record that the gut punch and the near-death experience is on the horizon and probably pretty soon. So now to your point of but to not leave people sitting in the fear band,
mhm,
obviously pray, plan, and prepare. We've covered this. Sheriff Mack has covered it. All the things that people should do. General Valley has covered it. I asked that
yeah,
question of all these important people, and there's one common thing they say: pray, plan, and prepare, and they give you advice on how to do that. But which tells you something's coming. So um, now, in terms of the people waking up and disclosure and time frames and all that, it's happening. It's a happening. It's not. Yes, there'll be an event, but there's a happening. I mean, let's see what's happening. Bolton, Letitia, uh, you know, the others. I don't have at the tip of my tongue. What's going on.
Tony.
That we own and control the media. But we
Mhm.
haven't, to an extent, and we haven't fully done. Just erased it yet and done EBS. It's a process. It's been
Right.
going on for years, and it is increasing and increasing and increasing. And and so in terms of what people want, and then you have, of course, just so much to get into. You've got the camp in our movement that say all these people are already executed and dead. Okay. And then you
Mhm.
have the other camp that says, no, that's not necessarily true. And then you have where I am, somewhere in the middle. This is where I sit. The power people that say not necessarily true, in my opinion. They're right about a lot of that, but they're
Mhm.
also not disclosing because that's not their role or duty right now. Okay.
Right.
Everyone is playing a role. All right. So, in my opinion, um, the awakening is happening in mass.
Mhm.
The tides is flipped. You can see it in Hollywood. You can see it with music. You can see it with sports. You can see everything's revealed. But what people are waiting for is that big, big moment, the perp walks of the big Comey and Mueller. Those are the other two, and Pence. Pence
Right.
now in
Yes,
the
that's
mix.
right.
They're all going to be everyone, which is why this is going to take years. But but in my opinion, from the people I talk to on camera and off, we've got dangerous moments, whether it's in General Valley, will tell you this. He's concerned about infrastructure hits, dams and bridges and routes to move food and supply lines and all of these things, the power grids and so forth and so on. Then you have the other levels of attacks, the mercenaries, the Soros funded thugs, the Antifas, the BLMs, all of those people that have been imported at the border over the years that haven't been deported yet. There's still millions of them here, and they're ready. As General Sheriff Max says, they're not here to play checkers and chess. So we're going to be dealing with that on the streets, death and destruction of property. We're going to be dealing, I mean, I interviewed retired Brigadier General Blaine Holt on the premiere episode of Eyes on Gitmo, who's a regular on Newsmax. And Blaine said right there, he said, even though we know about the 19 targeted cities, he says every community in America needs to be prepared. Dan Bongino said, this is going to come right to your front door. You better be ready to protect your family. Guys, these are big and important names. Generals, retired lieutenant
Yep.
colonels, Juan O. Savins, brigadier generals, Dan Bongino, deputy of the FBI now. You know, so I
Yeah.
don't take it with a grain of salt. I take it serious. So I believe
Right.
damage is coming. When? I don't know. Timeframes are a disaster. You want my opinion? Before Christmas. And I believe that the EBS gets launched. Most of the people I've been speaking to on the programs, these highly qualified individuals, all agree extraordinary high probability and more than likely going to happen that we will get that EBS. There will
Mhm.
be shutdowns or martial laws, situational or whatever it's going to be. All this is coming pretty soon. I know everyone's tired of hearing that. Well, hey, you know
Yeah,
what? This is war. War goes on.
right.
This is the war of wars. This is the course correction for all of humanity. That's what this
All of
is.
humanity.
Is it? Yeah, and it starts right here at home. Well, I'm in Thailand, but my home is in my heart, and that's America. And
Yeah.
so yeah,
And
that's
so
what's happening.
along with that, John, the only time frame that I see that keeps talked about all the time is the July 4th celebration in
Yes.
2026. So you would
Hmm.
think that there would have to be this of near-death experience before that.
Absolutely. In my opinion, I could be wrong. Maybe 3 months from now, everyone will be laughing at me. It didn't have. Hey, listen, I'm not Nostradamus. Neither is Juan. The best people that I have access to, that I bring to the public, there's a few people I don't, but by and large, my sources are disclosed. There they are. Here we are. They'll talk. They'll disclose what they choose to. I'll push the envelope as far as I can get it. But yes, you're right. The message will come, and July. Remember, part of this, to an extent, that's a whole nother conversation to break down. There is central casting. There are CGI. There is masks. I do believe certain people have been executed. I'll name three: George Herbert Walker Bush, John McCain, and Joe Biden. Those are the three I'll put on the record here right now, in my opinion. Right? But I'll say this, and probably a lot more. It doesn't matter. We're not going to argue about who's dead and who's alive. I'm right, you're wrong. We're on the same team. Let it play out, folks.
Right.
And because to an extent it is a movie, and that's why we do know in July there's going to be, Trump calls it the block. At least it's been told to me. Uh, we'll be having block parties all across America and celebrating the
Yeah.
250th year, but we're really celebrating more than that because,
Yeah.
in my view, it's the dawning of the golden age. President and Commander in Chief Donald J. Trump just ended, as your audience well knows, 7 or 8 conflicts and wars, finished, done. Got to get Ukraine handled. But you know what? To me, that's the dawning of the golden age. I'm 67. My entire life, there's been nothing but wars, of which we're now coming to learn that most of them never needed to happen. Okay, and so that's coming to an end. And of course, the med beds and the suppressed technologies from Tesla that went to Donald Trump's MIT professor uncle who went to Donald Trump, and so forth and so on. All of these things are real. Med beds are
Yeah.
real.
Mm.
Cures for diseases that they created are real. Information is going to change. One day, if you want to have me back, I'll talk about where I believe media is heading. And this is really amazing. We just got to get past that near death experience, and
Right.
we will be celebrating in July in a very, very big way. I believe that. And the light is at the end of the tunnel. There is a rainbow in the sky, and people need to, those of faith, pray and ground yourself in faith. You'll get through anything. Surround yourself with like-minded people in your community and family that understand the times in which we live and that expand those circles. Prepare with food and ammunition and medications and water and all the basic things to survive. Have exit routes if you have to get out of Dodge, if your area gets a little intense. But know this, the military has this. It's a military operation. Everything is, including Butler and including Charlie Kirk, in my opinion. And
Yes,
so
indeed. So I want to ask you one last question, and then, oh my goodness, I would love to have you back on sometime and all of that. But when I talked to retired Major General Paul Vallely, um, he did talk about the spiritual aspect of this, which is huge. And I was wondering if that's ever a topic, that comes up in your interviews as well in this
yes, it
information,
does.
psychological, spiritual war. Yes, please.
We've broken down the confusions that our fellow good Christian friends have concerning Israel. We pierced that. We've discussed that in detail with the panels. I've done it with Juan exclusively for an hour in a previous episode last year. I've done it recently in the Global Defense War panel. Um, I've done a few commentaries on my own. But in terms of you know, we and our audience knows this is a spiritual battle between good and evil. There is evil. It's
Mhm.
rearing its ugly face to all these humans, and we know who they are. So yeah, of course. I mean, the whole premise of this war is spiritual, and but then you break it down. You know, the Vatican has been exposed, the Catholic Church, and many other religions have been exposed. Ironically, the one that everyone thinks is the only bad guy out there, which is Islam. Islam was just hijacked and being used from political purposes. I'm not a Muslim. I have some very good Muslim friends. Everything's been messed with. But in terms
Yep.
of religion, I'm not a fan of religion. Those that know me know that. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. I believe in God, the supreme being and almighty power, and the Christ consciousness is within me. And just because I don't go to a building every Sunday at 11 o'clock to compare clothing with people, I I I I practice Christ-like living to the best of my ability. So religion's a problem. Um,
Mhm.
Religion is the cause of most wars. In God we kill, and it has to end. And Trump knows this. He doesn't want any more people being killed. Hello, what a simple concept. We know the bankers fund both sides of every war. We understand it. We know about the Ukraine and what really went on there. It's all coming to an end. I know it sounds crazy, but what do you think the golden age is in part? No wars, cures, health, prosperity, a renaissance on earth. I believe this is coming. But I'll tell you this. I don't mean to put a damper on such good news, but I'll give the secret out right now. If someone wants to write a best-selling book who knows the subject matter well, here's your book title, folks. Life Beyond Trump. That's a book that needs to be written in the beginning of his last year in this term, because that's an important question. Life beyond
Yeah.
Trump. And and so folks listening, do everything you can. When your children and grandchildren ask you, what were you doing when the global governance was being thrust down the collective throat of America and the world? What will your answer be? Get busy living or get busy dying. You better do something. Whether it's sharing a meme or something far greater than that, there's a million things you can and should be doing, because when Trump is gone, yes, we've got Barron and we got a few other Trumps, but the torch is going to be passed to us.
Hmm.
We are supporters of
Yes.
Trump. We are supporters of Q. We are supporters of the good military, and without them, it's over. It's a military
That's right.
operation. Okay,
Yeah, that's
we
right.
have got to take that torch and move with it, because Trump will shuffle
Absolutely.
off at some point. And my
Absolutely.
greatest concern is AI moving forward. But I'm not going to go there right now until we're on safe turf in these
Yes.
battles. Then I'm going to start exploring two things. That, and I'm also going to pour the coals on the fire. I've already reserved the domain name Golden Age of America to launch all the good things that are happening, and how we can push power to the creative spirit of everyone, whether it's in the arts and film or in health or wealth or everything. I believe spectacular, miraculous, incredible world lies ahead, and so
I
we're,
couldn't
we're
agree with
almost
you
there.
more, John. I could not agree with you more. I felt it. I have felt it. Everything's changing. We're going to learn how to heal through what God gives us in herbs and food and natural
Hmm.
springs that never, yeah, I mean, there's just a million things. I'm a vocal coach and a singer, and I know about frequencies and how healing they are just to the normal person.
Yes.
So it's incredible. So I think it's going to be time for you to bring back your album and the song, The Golden Age. It's got to come back, John.
Well, thank you. The only way, I'm not a good singer, and while I can dabble around with an instrument or two, I'm not a good musician. But I've managed out of the 50 songs to probably write a dozen pretty darn good ones, and three or four of them very specific to what's going on right now. And at some point, yeah, I would like to get the attention of um, established, talented artists that see the message of my song. And if they want to co-write it with me to, sharing those credits, by all means, I would love to get a couple, three of those songs out there now. Personally, be rewarding. Yeah, be economically rewarding, but it would be my greatest contribution, in my opinion, to the work I've been doing for 30 years. Because to me, music, really, film is the top, but music is part of film. So music is such an important medium, and film is such an important
Huge.
medium to reach the heart, minds, and spirits of people on this planet at this time. It's the most effective thing, and that's why I would love for the songs to get out there. It just doesn't seem like the right time for me right now, and I'm not worried about it, because these songs, when a good song is a good song is a good song, number one, and number two, uh, the battles and the restructuring of the course correction for America and humanity is going to go on for some years. So these songs will still have legs, even if they don't get picked up for another year or two.
Indeed. Absolutely. Well, this has been so cool talking to you and hearing your story, and then you just have such a wealth of information, and I would love to talk to you again, and I would love to bend your ear about who you think I could talk to of the people that you know as well. And this has just been incredible. And I it's early morning for you and late night here, and I'm just jazzed because of all the information you gave and your story, and you confirming that we are entering a golden age after this near death experience, and I'm all in. I'm ready
I
for it.
believe that. This is God's country, and I don't think he's finished with it yet.
No.
And Trump was, in my opinion, anointed and chosen by God. His whole life was meant for this moment, as is everybody else's. Uh, all of us here, and probably most of your audience, are the called. And so, again, if you don't know what to do, a simple thing of sharing these programs, sharing the truth, exposing the lies on social media, that's the minimum you can do. Talk to people online at the supermarket, just do something. Of course, you
Yes.
get, as General Flynn says, local action, national impact, get involved. There's so many things people can do. And I want to close out my last piece here, if I can, ma'am, is
Yes.
because this was all majority of what we've done in this 90 minutes is talk about me. That's not my style. I did it because you asked, and and you put me in my element. I opened up and put all this on record, and I'm glad I did. And I hope it's been inspirational for people, or because who cares about chambers, right? But if we can make a little agreement, you and I will put together a list of people that I think would entertain being on your platform to do this very thing. I love what you're doing, what you opened up with in your monologue, that you do in each of your shows, about bringing what you consider to be truth revealers, brave people that are putting their voice and their life on the line, because we do. We put our life on the line by doing this, and so do you
Mhm.
by doing this. And but the concept of what you're doing with the truth teller tales is very, very visionary and very, very good, because you are at, not because of me. I'm one they'll pass up later, but it's because you're right. These people have told the story in real time, in
Yep.
wartime, and more than just a war. This war's been more dangerous and than the kinetic wars. It's easy to say for
Yep.
someone who wasn't hasn't dodged bullets, but I know the guys that have dodged bullets, they would tell you the same thing. This war is very, very, very pivotal, and we're going to win it. So, what I'm saying is, the agreement I would like to make with you on air here is, I will provide some names for you that will should be in this platform for posterity later. And if you bring me back, where we don't talk about me, and
Thank
we don't
you.
even talk about my work, yeah, sure, I'll slide it in, but we want to talk about the issues of the day, because there I'd
Yes.
like to provide value for people. I want to calm those that are nervous. I want to
Yep.
strengthen those that are bold. I want to pick people off the floor. I want to do the best I possibly can to help people with what I consider to be the truths that I have discovered. So if you bring me back for an hour or so and let me discuss the issues, I'll send you some names.
That is a deal, John. And that is
Okay.
perfect timing because we're going to need you more than ever in this information and what and that program that you're talking about is going to be needed more than ever. And I would love that list. So thank you so much. This has been heaven for me. So thank you for all you're doing. I can't wait to watch your next show and all your continued information. Thank you. It's been an honor, John, and I can't wait to talk soon. So take
Well,
care.
thank you. God bless you. Thanks for your work, and God bless everyone listening. Stay safe. We're not out of the woods yet, but we got this. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.